over the summit of Mount Olympus, Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, right over those three summits. Goes right over Stevens Pass, Snoqualmie Pass, just touches the south end of Puget Sound, takes into San Juan Island. So from the crest of the Olympics to the crest of the Cascades, where we are right here, you know, or more specifically in the Maxwell Valley, but here as well, is a kind of perfect symbolic epicenter of the Puget Sound Basin. And when I made that discovery, that's when I knew I had to do this. It wasn't so that I could write a book, it was because I had to do this. And actually there was a certain element of desperation. At the time, I was really feeling quite depressed about our prospects and wrestling with a lot of despair and feeling a lot of powerlessness about the fact, especially, that I couldn't even seem to address my own life, you know, change my own patterns, given how strongly, you know, my convictions were about what was this about. So I knew I had to deal with this myself first. I had to prove that to myself that I was capable of at least beginning to make some bigger changes. So that was what this was all about. The book is divided into three sections that I call the boot, the spoke, and the paddle. And I just have a few little... So here is the walk that I took. 130-mile walk. This was the first trip that I took during the year through the three river deltas in the embrace of Whidbey Island: Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Skagit. And so through Stanwood, LaConner, Oak Harbor, down the 50-mile stretch of Whidbey. So these images are from that walk, and I'm not going to try to talk about where they are in particular, but so now would be a good time to turn the lights down if that's possible. That's the longhouse at the Tulalip Indian Reservation. Looking down Possession Sound and across Camino, Port Susan. Going through the Stillaguamish flats up towards Stanwood. And then walking through the Skagit with my wife Sally. All the snow geese and trumpeter swans in January and February. To see that on foot was really very inspiring. Sally joined me from Stanwood to LaConner for 2 days of the walk. LaConner, crossing into the Swinomish Indian Reservation on Fidalgo Island, the Native Cemetery, and the Swinomish Longhouse. This is my friend Marvin. If you've read the book, Marvin played an important part in the story. Crossing back onto my home island. I used to think it was 1 hour long. Would be. I discovered on this walk it's 4 days long. Pen Cove, Muscle Pens, Eby's Bluff. If you've never hiked it, you must hike it. Across Admiralty Inlet and the Monastery, Tahoma Zen Monastery, Double Bluff, where I spent a lot of time that year and continue to spend a lot of time. So that was my walk. And then I did a number of bike trips. I put about 3,000 miles on my bicycle that year. The most efficient animal on Earth in terms of weight transported over distance for energy expended is a human on a bicycle. The most efficient machine on Earth in terms of weight transported over distance for energy expended is a human on a bicycle. I absolutely have fallen in love with my bike. So this was an inner sound journey, Port Townsend, Olympic Peninsula, Kitsap Peninsula, Vashon Island, and then 50 miles through the industrial corridor from Tacoma to Seattle on that trip. And then a 500-mile trip around the Weiner circuit of my circle. And finally a trip that I took from home to summit of Mount Baker. Didn't quite make the summit, but under my own power, from home to summit and back. And here are some images from those 3 trips, or from those 3 trips. Oh, that's Vashon Island. I tried to go to the wounded places as well as just the beautiful places, and to really make contact with the parts that need a lot of restoration and a lot of committed care. Bike trails, wonderful bike trails that I kept stumbling on and I didn't even know was there. That's crossing to Port Angeles from Victoria. Beautiful bike trail from Port Angeles to Sequim that I didn't even know, 20 miles. On this trip I crossed all but, I think, 2 of the 14 rivers that flow into the Puget Sound. This is the Jamestown Swallow carving shed in Squid Bay, Jamestown Swallow Tribe, the Hamma, the rivers down Hood Canal, Gig Harbor, and then across and up the foothills of the Cascades from Puyallup and Enumclaw to Bellingham. It's crossing the White River down here in Enumclaw. Snohomish, very swollen in spring, Snohomish. That's the town of Snohomish. And then another beautiful 20-mile bike trail from Snohomish to Arlington, the Centennial Bike Trail. And on up through the Skagit to Bellingham and now down Chuckanut and the Samish River Flats coming. And then this is heading up to Mount Baker, the trip to Mount Baker. Getting stuck behind the 4th of July parade in Cedar Woolley. Heading up the Skagit and then meeting my climbing partners at the trailhead who brought my heavy stuff, my ice axe and crampon and climbing gear, and we head up the mountain.
Did you have asphalt?
What's that?
Did you ever have asphalt?
That was, that was definitely a big crevasse. And this is the still Squamish and coming down to Arlington and back home. So that gives a flavor of what I saw on my bicycle during the year, and then during the. Oops.
I can pop over that way.
What is that?
Battery pop
Oh, sorry about that. So during the summer, I took about a month to do a 400-mile circumnavigation of the Salish Sea by sea kayak. And I began with a 200-mile round trip from Possession Point, South Whidbey, through the San Juans to Cowichan Bay on Vancouver Island, and then back. Later did a circumnavigation of Whidbey Island and also down to Seattle and some of the urban waters. But I went to Cowichan Bay to witness the canoe rendezvous that year was being hosted by the Cowichan people. So I want to share some images from those different trips by paddle. Deception Pass, of course, and going up Saratoga Passage, Skagit Bay, through Deception Pass. My daughter Kristen and friends Robin and Jay joined me in Anacortes. This is Kristen. They took this double rowing dory. Jay and I had our kayaks and had a wonderful week-long trip out to Cowichan Bay. That's crossing over to Salt Spring Island and then into Cowichan Bay, where we got there about the same time as 106 seagoing canoes from all up and down the coast. We're converging there. Very moving thing to see. First canoe rendezvous potlatch of this sort on Vancouver Island in over a century. And on our way home, crossing over Harrow Strait again. Pretty dicey crossing, but we had calm water about 4:30 in the morning with a beautiful sunrise to get back over into U.S. waters. And then coming down through the back way, through Stanwood, and through the Skagit and Stillaguamish Flats. This is heading down to Seattle now. All the pockets of wildness, even in the urban areas, that you don't see normally. This is going around Whidbey Island. So I want to show one thing before, actually I want to, and Craig, you can interrupt any time with questions. Anyone else can interrupt with questions. So I wanted to show my carbon footprint as it has evolved. One of my major oh shit moments came when I took my carbon footprint back before I began the year. So how many of you have taken a carbon footprint online? Okay, if you haven't, I really encourage you to do so, and the next slide will give you an address if you want to write that down. So there are three different components to a carbon footprint, major components. One is home energy, how we use, how we heat our homes, how we use energy in our homes, how big they are, all of that. Food and recycling is a second category. How we eat, where it comes from, how far it travels, how much our food has been marinated in crude oil or not, has a huge impact on our carbon footprint. And then car and air travel, transportation, which is something like 53% of the Northwest emissions is from transportation. So here is the U.S. average. This is in tons of CO2 per year for home energy. And this is where I was in 2007. It already changed most of my light bulbs and done some of that stuff. So about 10 tons. And 2008, and since then it hasn't really gone down much because, I live in a 2,500 square foot home and uses a fair amount of energy. This is what it needs to get to, average for all of us, if we're going to have a sufficient reduction in CO2 emissions. So food and recycling, this is the national average, about 11 tons a year. We have a really good garden at home. Sally's an avid gardener. We eat quite a bit locally, so ours is a little less. And, we've continued to pull it down, eating more locally. But again, this is where we need to get to.